Vice President, welcome to our respected guest lecturer.
That this workshop is being conducted today, and I and my team truly appreciate that the department is proactively working with us to ensure that all the provisions of the Disability Act are being implemented properly in our state. I've been looking to see where we are, lacking and what we should do as we move forward. Thank you very much really to the Engineer-in-Chief and his team for collaborating with us on this sensitization workshop. And I must say, before I go on, I'm really happy to see all the progress that has been made in this complex itself. The last time that I was here for another program, it was very congested, it was not very pleasant also. Now I'm glad to see that a lot of things are taking place, and it's a very good example of what accessibility is all about. The last time I could barely move around. We had to hold the program down there in the canteen area, I think near the gate, and even there, if there was no, I couldn't get up into the canteen room itself. Had to be somehow carried up the few steps that are there. That kind of thing. It's so undignified. It's so difficult for us also, and difficult for other people also. So today it was so easy. We could just come right up to the ramp, then come up to the elevator. Then it brought us up here. That should be the experience of everyone, of persons with disabilities, whatever ability anybody may have. For elderly people, also senior citizens, I will be talking about all that later on, touching on all that, but that should be the experience of everyone, like whatever ability anybody may have, and that is what we are working towards. So I'm really happy to see all that. This, and especially this complex, this department, it should become a kind of a model complex, department that everyone can come and look to, because the engineers are here. You are the ones who are doing all these kind of work everywhere, whether in the district or whether here in the headquarters. All the public buildings, the public spaces are being taken care of by you all. So if this can be such an example, everybody can come and see, oh, that is what we are supposed to do. That is where we are supposed to move, that is how we are supposed to move ahead, that would be such a great thing, so I'm really glad to see all the, the work that is taking place now. Now, in letter and spirit, that is a phrase that everybody likes. People are quite fond of using, in letter and spirit. We should do this both in letter and spirit, Whether they really mean it or not, people are fond of using that phrase. But when it comes to executing the various provisions of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, the Disability Act, letter and spirit, this is something so important actually. It becomes very meaningful, because understanding why something needs to be implemented is something so important, the explicit instructions, the directives, the laws, the rules, it's there. We can all read and see, oh, this one has to be made, oh, that one has to be done, that has to be put into place. It's easy to, just see, read, and then do something. But if we don't understand why we are putting that into place, for example, today we are going to talk about accessibility, ramps, lifts. You all have already, done all that in your office building. So those things, why are we putting those into place? If we don't have that understanding, then the implementation will not be done properly. So this understanding something in letter and in spirit, not just reading that law that is there, but understanding why that law has to be implemented, that becomes very important, particularly in disability law. My presentation will be a mix of, trying to get a better understanding of disability needs, disability needs, the underlying intent of the various provisions that are there, and how best they can be implemented. Now, the Office of the State Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities, that is my office, is a monitoring body that is mandated by the RPwD Act, that is the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, to ensure the proper implementation of the various provisions of the Act in the state. Now, the SCPT office has been given the powers of a civil court to take up cases and issues pertaining to the rights of persons with disabilities. All the public buildings, all government buildings and spaces in the state of Nagaland will now become disabled friendly. That it will now become, barrier free, and it will be with immediate effect. That was the notification. Disability, the disability laws, the disability provisions. There is a lot of unawareness, even now, in our state. I keep on saying this whenever I talk about disability. There was huge neglect of the disability sector for a long time, for many, many years. That's the truth. We have to face that truth. So, actually, we are now talking about the 2016 Act, that is the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. But long before that, that is the updated version. Long before that, in 1995, we already had the old Disability Act. So now we are talking about these accessibility laws, this, that, whatnot. But then, long ago in 1995 itself, all those laws were already there in the old Act. And all our buildings and all our structures, all our, whatever is being done, this was supposed to have been following all these laws that have already been laid down since 1995. But the truth, the fact is that nothing was ever implemented. Some were actually basically not implemented at all. Those where some things were done were, just implemented in name. So there was still very, a lot of unawareness, not only in this department, in all departments, thankfully with all the work that many people have been doing in the disability sector, the awareness is improving, better understanding is there, but still, we still have a long way to go. So that understanding of what is the role exactly that the department, the PwD, whether it's housing or roads and bridges. Actually today we will be dealing mostly with the housing part of the department section, I guess. But roads and bridges also actually it's a very important division, which here in our state we still are not even talking about that still. Because roads, those who are dealing with roads and all, we all know roads are supposed to be accessible for persons with disabilities, for wheelchair users, the sidewalks, the curb cuts, those are very important. If you look at all the new constructions that are going on, the roads and the sidewalks, the pathways that are going on, it's impossible for us to, for a wheelchair user like me, I go then, maybe for a short distance I will be able to go that it becomes all steps, that kind of thing. So actually, even in roads and bridges, this accessibility laws and harmonized guidelines, which my colleagues will be taking up, is very important. And but today we will be dealing mostly with the housing part of it. So this is the notification that had come out from the department, and here it can be clearly seen that in February 5th, 2019, that this notification had come out, and it is said that it should be with immediate effect. And I think we can honestly say that nothing much has been done to implement this department notification itself. So now, before we go on to other things, I would just like to, because as I said earlier, a good understanding of what exactly accessibility means. This is so important if we are to implement the provisions of accessibility. So let's first talk about accessibility. These days a lot of talk goes on about accessibility, disability accessibility, and all sorts of things in various meetings, in various workshops and all. You will hear this word accessibility. A lot of nowadays it has become quite common. But though we talk about it, not everyone seems to really know what it means. Why is there a need for accessibility? Many people are not fully aware of this. And to get a clear understanding of the need for accessibility, we have to first understand what lack of accessibility really means. You know what lack of accessibility does to people who has mobility issues, you know. And in short, you know, to put it simply, what lack of accessibility really means is that a large section of the society basically, basically has no life, you know. So no accessibility equals no life for persons with disabilities. Now I will just talk a little bit about that, you know. So inaccessibility, lack of accessibility, when we talk about that, it means isolation. Isolation. Today, see, we have all come together today for this program. You know, then socialization, taking part in, the life of the community. You know, when we can do that, there is no isolation. But many people who live with disabilities, who have mobility issues, or who cannot see or, interact with people, now, they cannot go anywhere and they are confined to their homes, you know, to the four walls of their rooms even. Many people, because of inaccessibility. You know, when there is lack of accessibility, it means that children, young people with disabilities cannot go and, cannot go to school, cannot go to college and get an education. It means that people with disabilities in their prime, you know, in the working age, they cannot go and work, they cannot go and engage in income-generating activities and earn a livelihood. You know, many people with disabilities and their families, they live in poverty. That's the truth. You know, when we talk about BPL and things like that, you know, you will find that many people with disabilities and their families live much, much below the poverty line because of the cost of disability. You know, the paradox is that there is a huge cost in disability, you know, but then there is an extra huge cost in disability, but the paradox is that the income is much, much lesser than other people without that extra cost. So to cover the extra cost of disability is impossible in many cases. So many people with disabilities, you know, they live in abject poverty. And the lack of disability, accessibility does this to many people, you know. And, then inaccessibility, it means that they are excluded from celebrations, you know, weddings, birthdays, different parties, or even our festivals, you know. When there is no accessibility, how can we go and join them? So we are excluded from these celebrations, from church services, you know, worship services, from everyday life, you know, all aspects of everyday life that non-disabled people take for granted. So, as I said, no accessibility means persons with disabilities, people who live with disabilities, they basically have no life. Once this is understood, you know, we understand what inaccessibility does, then it becomes easier to understand the need for accessibility. You know, accessibility is critical to ensure all citizens are included in the life of the community and they are able to access equal opportunities as equal citizens. That is so important. Equal opportunities. You know, when a child without disability can go and study in school, can go and sit in a classroom and study with the friends. Why can a child with disability not be able to go? They are not getting an equal opportunity because of the lack of accessibility, because of the lack of understanding of disability. So equal opportunities are not being afforded to the disabled community. So accessibility becomes so critical in this regard. That for me, as soon as I saw the picture, you know, in the papers, was the lack of accessibility for a wheelchair user like me through the front door, as you all can see, you know. If they have given a ramp at the back side, that is not accessible. That is creating an undignified situation for me. You know, when everyone is entering through the front door, why should I go to the back side like I'm a thief? I'm not a thief. I need to go in through the front door like everybody else. So the first red flag was for me is that front door. There is no accessibility for me. And so I have, actually to be honest, I'll tell you honestly, I have very serious doubts that this massive building costing crores of money has been constructed with due consideration of the laws of accessibility and disability provisions. It will be inspected soon and appropriate action taken. That I will assure you that we will be inspecting it and appropriate action will be taken. It is, as I have already said, it is completely unacceptable that construction of public buildings in our state is still violating accessibility laws and provisions. Now, this section 45, the corresponding section in the Nagaland rules is section 50. All existing public buildings shall be made accessible in accordance with the rules formulated by the central government within a period not exceeding 5 years from the date of notification of such rules. So the rules were notified in 2017. So the deadline of 5 years has already expired, and we can see the state of affairs in our state. So, all these provisions in the sections mentioned are the responsibility of the authority of the department that looks after the construction and the maintenance of public and government buildings and spaces. This was why the suo motu inquiry was served upon the department, more so because, as I've already mentioned earlier, the department had already issued that notification in 2019. What are the steps being taken to comply with the notification, departmental notification? Then what are the steps being taken to make sure all the new buildings coming up are accessible and inclusive? This were and are the things that we are concerned about, and we want to know, and we wanted to know, and we still want to know, and we want to know how do we move forward. I repeat myself, I think I've repeated myself a lot of times already, but I repeat myself, but I just want to underline that it is completely unacceptable, that virtually all our government and public buildings and spaces are still inaccessible, and we continue to disgracefully build inaccessible buildings and structures in violation of all existing disability laws.